So, we've come to module 2. After you spent time in the last module really focusing on connecting to yourself, really becoming mindful of all of the experiences that you have in your body, whether they are physical sensations, whether they're a sensation of hunger, thirst, fatigue, pain, tension. All of those physical sensations provide you with data. And last time you were learning to better connect to and listen to your body so that you can begin to listen to the additional information that extends beyond just the physical. Beyond the physical are the emotions and the way they rest in the body. There are a host of emotions that we feel, and we think that somehow they're housed in the mind. But truly, we have an emotive body. Our emotions live within our bodies. And sometimes physical pain will appear in order to represent emotional pain or distress. So, last time you spent time connecting to your body, to your thoughts, to your feelings, and then perhaps you might have even stretched yourself a little further so that you could connect to something greater than yourself. Sometimes when we are able to get super clear within ourselves, we can also feel the way we're connected to the divine. And you don't have to be religious. This is really about a personal relationship that you have with something greater than yourself. And that is whatever you design that to be. It's not judged by me, it's not determined by me, nor is it determined really by anybody else. Even if you're participating in a religious faith, even that faith is really not designing or determining the kind of relationship you have with something greater than yourself. There may be particular rules and regulations and books that you study and people that you worship with and a place that you go, but at the end of the day, religion and spirituality are really two different things, and your spirituality is a reflection of your relationship with something greater than yourself. And perhaps you even took it a step further during this past study session. Perhaps you even looked at the way you connect others. So our module 1 was all about connecting to self, connecting to something greater than yourself, and connecting to others. So where's that bring us this time? Well, we are to module 2, where we're here to inspect. We're here to inspect our thoughts, our feelings, our experiences, our circumstances, our dynamics. And why, you say? Why are we doing all that? Because there are things that rest below the surface that have impact for us, and we're not always conscious of that impact. Consider this idea. There's something called unconscious bias or implicit bias. And largely, we have early experiences in life that can color or impact later experiences that we might have, or later feelings that we might have, or even represent aversions. But they're not things that we really understand because they're not conscious. So for instance, let's say you had an experience with a dog when you were very tiny. I think about one of my sons who, at the time that we moved into our home, our neighbors had a very large dog. And so in comparison, maybe the dog was just a little smaller than him. Frankly, I think the dog was just a little bit bigger than him. And the dog was very, very friendly, and so would make quick movements towards the children. And my son became very frightened of this big dog. I don't think that there was anything that he could articulate about the fear. I think that the thing was bigger than him and could knock him over, and it had knocked him over. Not aggressively, just enough to kind of show size and show, that the dog had a little bit more, ability to move around and had a bigger body. So I don't think that my son actually remembered that actual conscious fear of the dog, or that he was afraid of the dog knocking him over. But over time, we noticed that it generalized to all dogs. So we went to a friend's home where he spent a lot of time. They had a much older dog, very sweet, kind of just rambled around. And I noticed my son always shying away from the dog. And I remember asking him one day, why are you shying away from this dog? This dog could never in a million years hurt you. And he said, I don't know. I know she's a very nice dog. There's no reason for me not to like her. And he would extend his hand, and if the dog came to smell, he would quickly take his hand back. I asked him again, what are you worried that she's going to do? And he said, Mom, I don't know. I'm not worried at all. So how does this work? Implicit bias, meaning that you have some sort of aversion, for instance, in this case, to dogs, didn't start with something in his conscious mind. If he at 5 years old had been bitten by a dog, he would remember for the rest of his life that he was bitten by a dog. He would have maybe develop a conscious bias against dogs and maybe develop an affinity for cats. But instead, because he was so young, this event that happened that really, to all of us, was nothing. And in fact, to him, was just enough to sit below the surface, creating an issue for him, an aversion to dogs, a fear. Now, gladly, I guess he could live the rest of his life without dogs, but, well, we have a dog now, so he's having to deal with that. And really, the first step in the process, of course, is becoming aware that there was an implicit bias that happened to be started by this experience that he had when he was very small and didn't even remember it. Now, that's just a very simple example, but there are other examples that are much more concerning in many of our lives that may have to do with our religion or our race or our community, where we have an experience very early on that causes us to shy away or develop fears or frustrations or anger or rage that can then fuel us to act in certain ways that are not in our best interest. And unless we know what they are, how can you ever resolve them? So here in Module 2, we're not necessarily looking for, why you do or don't like dogs. We're here to really allow you to learn to inspect your mind and inspect your feelings, inspect your memories, inspect your circumstances and your relationships, and even the dynamics that you have with other people. And as we inspect them, we'll have a better understanding of who's in the driver's seat. So I can tell you a little bit about, from my own example, when I was just had twins, so maybe 6 months later, there were a group of women in my twins club who ran marathons. Now, never did I ever thought that I would run a marathon. I never wanted to do that. I wasn't one of those people. I'll tell you what, if I made it to 3 miles in a jog, I considered myself lucky. I was out of breath. And even as an incredibly fit aerobics instructor, running was really never something that I liked or enjoyed. And I probably wouldn't have opted to be competitive in that sport. So I didn't really want to join these moms who are going to go run a marathon. And in fact, it was a half marathon. And one of the women actually was heavier. And I couldn't wrap my mind around, I knew elite athletes, and I couldn't wrap my mind around how could she possibly, think that she was going to be able to run this half marathon. And when I asked her, not such an abrasive question, when I asked her how, did she envision finishing, she said, finish? What do you mean? I've already run 9 marathons. And instantly my mind was confused. And as a psychologist, I began to look at my bias and these weird thoughts and feelings I had and these weird ideas that I'd come up with that didn't at all need to be in the driver's seat. So I asked her about her experiences and, she shared with me, and I said, well, I don't know that I could ever do that. I've never even been able to get to 3 miles without feeling out of breath and uncomfortable. So she said to me, I will print you out a training schedule. And I said, but it's only 3 months away. And she said, perfect. So I had every intention of shaking her off, but I thought, you know what? If she can do it, maybe I can do it. And I don't have to promise anything. The entry form was not that expensive, so I thought, worst case scenario, I'll do this thing. I'll prepare to do this thing, and if I don't like it, I just won't do it. I'll forego the money. So I began training, and what I noticed was that, I'll tell you what, those 3 mile days, I wanted to die. I don't know how I did it. But when I began to increase my mileage towards 5 miles, I noticed something really odd. And that was, apparently, I don't warm up until mile 5, because every mile after mile 5 was easy for me. So suddenly I had to begin to question, why did I think it was going to be so hard? Why did I think that I couldn't do it? Why, in fact, was I being controlled by thoughts or feelings below the surface that said, you can't do this? At the end of the day, what I discovered is my early asthma as a child left me feeling, as if I couldn't breathe when I exercised. And the thought about that, not the feeling, because I didn't usually get it when I exercised. I got it in other situations. But the feeling and the thought I had about that feeling got wedged below the surface and caused me to have this belief that I was not a runner, that I was not somebody who could run more than 3 miles, and that if I tried to do that, I would be in danger, that I would be in jeopardy. So I simply developed this little response that allowed me to avoid it. And when I manually overrode that response and I gained access to the thoughts about what was happening, suddenly I became a runner. And suddenly I was able to run far, far longer distances than I'd ever thought I could before. And so I ran the La Jolla Half Marathon and I finished in good stead. I even did an extra mile and a half because my parking was so far away. And it was wonderful. But the most wondrous activity there was learning how I could unpack my own thoughts and feelings and cause a different outcome. So that's what we're going to invite you to do during this module. We're going to have you inspect thoughts and feelings and ideas from below the surface. You are going to stalk your mind. That's what the Toltecs call it. They envisioned in the great mystery schools of the world that if you could stalk your mind like a great cougar or puma, that you would find thoughts that were controlling your actions or your beliefs and controlling the limitations you were setting on yourself. And by plucking those thoughts out one by one, you could also resolve any limitations that you'd set on yourself. So we're going to stalk our mind. We're going to stalk our feelings, because those come in definitely as a strong first or second, and even stalk our relationships. Sometimes we have healthy relationships, sometimes not so much. So we're going to go ahead and stalk our relationships as well, so that we get a better understanding of what is in the driver's seat, what below the surface might be maybe negatively impacting the way we think or feel about certain situations, and might be stopping us from really embracing the powerful entrepreneurs and leaders that we can be. So I'm going to invite you to stalk your mind, stalk your thoughts, stalk your feelings, and really make sure that you take time each day to begin looking below the surface. Find out if there are memories that are connected to the limiting beliefs, thoughts, or experiences that you're having that might actually help you identify where the roots of those problems are, so that we can move towards resolving those. All right, it's your time. Let's get Module 2 done.